Idol Sofia Sergeyevna Markelova. Hoping to escape his endless problems for at least a few days, Kirill goes fishing at the remote Temnovit base. The waters of the local Lake Kosh are dark and cold, and Kirill has yet to discover how many terrible secrets they conceal. The cover for this story was created by a neural network, Sofia Markelova. Idol. In the headlights, the forest road emerged in ragged patches from the darkness, disappearing instantly beneath the Niva's wheels. The car bounced constantly over the bumps, but Kirill had no intention of slowing down. According to Pal Paliki's directions, it was only a short drive to their destination, and the fierce rage that had been seething all the way from home hadn't yet fully subsided. The mere memory of his wife's hysteria over his spontaneous departure made Kirill want to floor the gas and race to the ends of the earth. Ahead, a striped barrier appeared, torn from the ground and resting on the side of the road. Directly behind it, a rusty sign towered above the thicket of bushes, its peeling paint forming a single word: darkness. Everything was quiet and gloomy. The road ran into the thickest part of the pine forest. Rolling down the window, Kirill took a deep breath of the cool air, saturated with the crispness of evening. The anger in his soul involuntarily subsided, giving way to a thrilling anticipation. Carefully steering the car forward, he didn't even notice that he had been followed for some time. When there was a short, sharp knock on the driver's door, Kirill flinched and nervously turned his head to the left. "Lost?" the short stranger asked dryly, peering into the Niva's cabin. His face was invisible. Only the orange glow of the cigarette, clenched between his teeth, drifted through the air, doing nothing to dispel the darkness. "I'm not sure. Is this a hunting and fishing lodge?" Kirill asked, trying to get a better look at the stranger who had crept up silently. A red spark flew off the cigarette and dissolved into the surrounding darkness. "Yes." "Then I'm definitely in the right place." Kirill smiled slightly and stuck his calloused, rough hand out the window. "You're probably the local gamekeeper, right? Nice to meet you." "I'm Kirill Alexeyevich. Pal Palich sent me. He promised there couldn't be a better spot for roach fishing." After mentioning Pal Palich, the interlocutor relaxed somewhat, although he still maintained a rather aloof attitude and did not even shake the outstretched hand. "Yuri Glebovich," he said curtly, "one of the caretakers." An awkward silence fell. The ignored hand returned to the salon. "Well," Kirill hesitated. "Where should we go next?" "I don't know anything yet. There's a hut up ahead on this road. Stop there." Yura instantly vanished into the shadows, as if he thought such a laconic answer was sufficient. Kirill grunted in displeasure and drove on. 100 meters later, a sturdy hut appeared, its hollow windows reminiscent of the glowing yellow eyes of a huge monster lurking in the forest. A stocky, bearded man wearing a swamp-colored cap and carrying an armful of firewood under his arm stood on the threshold. "I keep wondering who came here from the main road," he shouted from the porch. "I keep seeing headlights flickering between the trees, the rustle of tires, and yet it seems like no one was supposed to be here today." After parking and getting out of the car, Kirill met another caretaker. "Just Valera," he introduced himself with a smile, firmly shaking the outstretched hand. "Welcome back. What are your plans? Are you staying at our base for a long time?" Kirill briefly outlined the purpose of his visit. Night fishing is always welcome. The roach are big, some weighing over 3 pounds. It's pure pleasure, one bite after another. Valera even smacked his lips. Why are we all chatting on the doorstep? Come inside, Kirill, and get some warmth. Stepping aside, the base caretaker invited the guest into the warm hut. Inside, it was spacious. The walls hung with skins, and behind the stove lay a pile of old deer antlers. Wooden planks, shavings, and hewn blocks lay scattered here and there, and the thin layer of straw that covered the floor crunched underfoot. Actually, I've come here to stay with you for the whole weekend. I think I'll only leave on Monday morning. Kirill shared his plans, taking a rickety stool by the window and looking around the room with interest, where the absence of a woman's hand was clearly noticeable. Good. What did you have, a falling out with your wife or something? Valera guessed, grinning into his beard. Is it that noticeable? I've got a good eye. I've seen so many men like you here. And it's all written all over your face. You look so gloomy. You came straight from work on Friday. You haven't even taken off your overalls. You want to leave on Monday morning. And apparently you're not even planning on stopping by home. You twisting the gold ring on your finger thoughtfully. It's clear there's trouble with your wife. Valera stacked the firewood next to the stove and began poking the fire with a poker. Kirill could only marvel at his insight, put the ring down, and perplexedly smoothed his short pig-like mustache with his fingers. That's exactly how it is. What is the quarrel about? Yes, she has been demanding too much attention lately. Sits at home all day, I suppose? Doesn't work? Yeah, and all I hear is, we haven't gone anywhere together in so long. We barely talk. You're hardly ever with me. You can't just focus on work. How are you planning on going fishing this weekend? We wanted to visit Mom, Kirill said, imitating his wife's voice. Then why do you put up with all this? I love her. I really do. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married her, and now I have no one closer to me than her. But I'm not made of iron. My boss at work is driving me crazy with his orders from above. My neighbor drills holes in the walls every day like a madman. And now my wife nags me, apparently out of boredom. To hell with them all. Now that's the right approach. Your nerves are more important. I want to relax like a normal person. Just have some time to myself, without anyone bothering me or hovering over me. I even turned off my phone so I wouldn't be distracted. Very well, very well. Well, never mind. Just sit quietly with your fishing rod and breathe in some fresh air. You might actually feel better and all your worries will disappear. The wood in the stove crackled softly and the lulling roar of the flames could be heard. I just hope you won't have too many people here, tomorrow or the day after, huh? I don't want to be crowded on the shore like cucumbers in a barrel. Boar hunting season opened this week, so more and more men are heading out to catch boar. The lake here, Kosh, is completely empty, so you can fish in peace and quiet. Don't worry about it. Well, that's good. Kirill rejoiced, quickly pushing all thoughts of his wife away and settling into a good-natured mood. That means I arrived just in time. If it weren't for meeting Pal Palich and his recommendation, I wouldn't have even known we had such a place here in the region. I always went to Kamenki as usual, but this year all the fish died. Maybe the water got dirtier, who knows? So I decided to follow his advice and try a new resort. That's right. Pal Palich knows this place better than anyone. He sends everyone here, Valera chuckled. His tanned face was illuminated by the flames surging from the stove. It seemed his quivering tongues were about to lick his tanned skin, smoothing out the crow's feet around his eyes. Thanks to him, there's no shortage of fishermen and hunters, even though the base isn't easy to find. After discussing matters for a while longer, learning more about Temnovit, and agreeing on payment, Kirill said goodbye to Valera and prepared to head toward the lake. Yura was already waiting for him at the threshold of the huntsman's hut. A silent shadow, a cigarette always dangling from the corner of his mouth, he sat on the porch steps, smoking thoughtfully. "Take that road over there, along the embankment," the caretaker said without waiting for a question. In the dim light pouring through the house's windows, he looked rather sickly. His skin had a yellowish tint, and pockmarks and pimples were scattered across it, like dozens of tiny insects. Kirill merely nodded, quickly climbing into the car. The man's unpleasant gaze chilled his blood, forcing him to constantly avert his gaze, as if Yura knew something about him no one else should know. While Valera turned out to be a pleasant, sociable man in his early 40s, his companion, though the same age, had the stern look of a senile old man, and for some reason, Kirill didn't expect anything good from Yura. The car, its wheels churning through mud mixed with sand, sped toward a narrow road leading deeper into the base. Soon, the mirror-like surface of the water gleamed ahead, and Kirill drove straight to the shore of an elongated lake, half lost in the darkness of the approaching night. It exuded peace and quiet. Along the shore, leaning close to the water's surface, weeping willows rustled softly, and nearby dense thickets of cattails could be seen. Kirill parked, got out, and stretched thoroughly until he heard a crunch. Not a soul. That's already wonderful, he thought happily, looking around. Having pitched a bright red tent, unloaded all the fishing equipment from the car and changed into a warm suit, he inflated and launched the boat, acting as usual and quickly. Lake Koshch seemed to freeze, listening to its bustling guest. Taking a firm grip on the oars, Kirill steered the boat away from the shore, but it proved no easy task. The water was like fuel oil, and the oars sank, reluctantly turning in the rowlocks. Kirill even turned on his headlamp and leaned over the side to make sure there was no seaweed around. However, the smooth, opaque, inky water prevented him from seeing anything. "Okay, I'm just tired today, that's all." It took great effort to continue rowing, but as soon as the shore disappeared into the darkness, Kirill exhaled loudly and pulled the short oars in. Black spots of some thick substance of unknown origin had frozen on the blades of one of them. Kirill sniffed warily, and the foul odor of rot and stale stagnant water assaulted his nostrils. "Ah, what crap! This place isn't particularly clean," he thought discontentedly, wiping his oar with an old rag and laying it on the bottom of the boat. Maybe that's why there is no one here, because, like in Kamenki, the fish here are sick, and the water itself is sewage and dirty. Of course, no one could answer this unspoken question, but Kirill decided not to jump to conclusions and instead try to cast a line first. As soon as the float hovered at the edge of the water's surface and the gentle ripples subsided, the scarlet antenna instantly vanished. Kirill even blinked, not expecting such a quick bite. He gave the reel handle an experimental twist, and the line tensed like a string. Valera wasn't lying. The fish are biting well. Kirill felt his prey barely resisting, meekly allowing itself to be pulled to the surface. As soon as the float emerged from the water, it became apparent that something unidentifiable was hanging from the hook. The dense green lump of seaweed that Kirill dumped into the boat showed no signs of life, but it emitted a foul odor. Damn it, the seaweed had barely been untangled when the headlamp's light revealed a black, nearly rotten piece of wood where the hook had snagged. The water-swollen board, slightly shorter than a palm, revealed itself to be a carved doll, arms folded across the chest, a head with two braids draped over the shoulder, and a frilly sarafan. The doll, with deep knife-scratched eyes, watched Kirill. There's nowhere to even fish properly. They've littered everything. They're pigs, not people, he thought angrily, and tossed the doll into the bottom of the boat, intending to throw it in the trash later. The mood was ruined, but Kirill stubbornly adjusted the phosphorus jig and cast his line again. The night was just beginning. It was too early to give up. Somewhere high in the sky above him, a raven suddenly flew overhead with a loud cry. The shrill caw instantly echoed throughout the surrounding area, and Kirill merely shook his clenched fist after the noisy bird that had startled him. Judging by the flapping of its wings, it decided not to fly far. It circled a bit longer and then disappeared into the darkness somewhere nearby. He felt the vague sensation of someone else's gaze, scrutinizing and unkind. The line tightened again, the float sank silently, and Kirill barely had time to tighten his grip on the rod before it began to literally rip from his hands. A fish of incredible strength had apparently swallowed the baited maggot right down to its gills and was now trying to escape. Kirill braced both feet against the side of the boat, pulling on the rod, reeling in and cursing incoherently under his breath. It seemed as if a true sea devil was sitting on the other end of the line. The agility and power with which it was straining for freedom. "Come on!" Kirill, gritting his teeth, waged an unequal battle with his invisible opponent. Suddenly, the fishing line broke with a thin melodic sound. "Damn, what the hell is this?" Slamming his open palm against his knee, channeling all the anger from his unsuccessful fishing trip into the blow, Kirill jerked the fishing rod toward him, turned on the headlamp, and began rummaging through his tackle box. The skein of line refused to budge. As if alive, it kept slipping from his fingers, sinking deeper. When Kirill finally caught the reel and looked up, his amazement knew no bounds. In the brief minutes he'd been searching, the entire Lake Kosh had become shrouded in a thick, impenetrable fog. It rose like a solid wall above the water, and now he couldn't see the shore, the sky overhead, or anything. Even the bow and stern of the boat had vanished into the milky white shroud. "That's it. I had a blast fishing," Kirill said with feeling looking around. They should have returned to the shore and waited for the weather to change. Although, if this bad weather continued all weekend, they could have immediately packed up camp and headed home. But Lera was waiting for Kirill there, probably still upset and having already complained to her mother on the phone. The last thing Kirill wanted was to spend the entire Saturday and Sunday listening to his wife's complaints in one ear and his mother-in-law's insults in the other. And the soundtrack to all this would undoubtedly be the neighbor's jackhammer, which was annoying to the point of grinding his teeth. Kirill shuddered at the mere thought and nervously twisted the gold ring on his finger. It would be better to spend the entire weekend in a tent, unable to fish due to the impenetrable fog, than to return home now, where all the torments of hell awaited him. The oars landed softly in the water, raising no splash. Fog swirled around, smoky tendrils swirling into vortexes as the boat passed through in complete silence. Kirill rowed diligently, overcoming the water's resistance, but he wasn't entirely sure he'd chosen the right direction. The shore wasn't approaching, and just as a vague sense of foreboding was taking hold of Kirill, his boat lightly scraped the ground. But it wasn't the shore. The fog here was loose, ragged, and translucent. A small island emerged through the ephemeral wisps, though to Kirill it looked more like a muddy swamp hammock. A 4-meter-tall wooden statue towered on a clay mound. There's something else I wanted to warn you about. The lake here is ancient and deep, and before the water came here, there was a pagan temple in its place. People from nearby villages prayed there. That era passed long ago. The settlements disappeared, and springs began to gush from the ground. Only one idol remains. So don't be alarmed if you see it in the dark. It's of historical value. It can't be torn down. Valera's words suddenly came true. During their conversation in the hut, the caretaker had shared the history of the base and told him about Lake Kosh. But Kirill could hardly have imagined back then that it would turn out to be true and not just a story to attract curious fishermen. But the idol was indeed standing where it belonged. Human features, carved by craftsmen hundreds of years ago, were visible on the black, moss-covered wood. The grim face of an old man, a thick staff in his hands, and a long beard and mustache, coated either with metal or some kind of silver paint. The gloomy statue stood out against the white background of the fog, and in the light of his headlamp, Kirill discerned that its top was crowned with a horned cow's skull, upon which a coal-colored raven sat proudly. The bird turned its head, and faint blue sparks flickered in the air. Noticing the stranger peering intently at it, it leaped from the idol, cawing loudly and flapping its wings. As soon as the raven disappeared into the fog, all sounds instantly died away. The idol sent shivers down Kirill's spine. It was as if its hollowed-out eye sockets, covered in a layer of moss, were looking down on the fisherman, just like the empty eye sockets of the wooden doll still lying in the bottom of the boat. The idol was invisible from the shore at such a dark time of day, which meant only one thing. Kirill had pulled his boat even further from the moorings in the fog, toward the very heart of the lake. He needed to row back, and quickly. The old temple terrified Kirill, though he couldn't explain why he should be afraid of a rotten wooden post. But the oars obeyed reluctantly. tearing through the water with effort. They slowly sank into the bottomless darkness of the abyss, then returned heavily to the surface. Kirill was drenched in sweat as he tried to swim away from the idol, swarming with swarms of midges and gnats, but the island refused to move away. Just a minute later, one of the oars suddenly caught on something underwater and sank sharply, instantly becoming heavy. No matter how hard Kirill tried to hold on, the oar sank, tearing out its rowlock and disappearing into the dark waters. How could this be? Kirill whispered quietly, trying to calm himself down and come to his senses. The strange things happening on this lake were beginning to truly worry him. Left with only one oar, he began to row even more slowly. The boat was now completely motionless, suspended in space, while waves appeared around it out of nowhere. They grew larger and larger, and now a frightened Kirill, leaning over the side, began to help himself with his free hand, not really hoping for anything. The icy lake water was scalding. His skin burned with cold, and his fingers instantly became unresponsive. So when something slimy and elastic touched Kirill's broad palm, he didn't immediately feel it. "What the hell?" was all he managed to scream before someone grabbed him firmly by the wrist and roughly pulled him off the boat. His entire body was enveloped in stinging, icy waves, viscous as tar. Gasping in surprise and struggling helplessly in the cold water that seeped everywhere, Kirill felt something bite him painfully on the shin. More bites followed, on his knees, on his stomach, on his feet where his rubber boots had slipped off. It felt as if his skin was being ripped off alive, yanked sharply in all directions, like a pack of starving dogs fighting for a piece of fresh meat. Kirill screamed in terror and pain, his hands throwing up a cloud of spray, trying to push away the invisible threat. The water around him boiled, turning copper-colored, and his flickering headlamp kept revealing skinny humanoid creatures caked in mud and algae just near the surface. Their rotten teeth flashed near Kirill's face, threatening to tear out his ears or nose, and their thin hands clutched at his clothes. The boat was far away, in swirling clouds of fog, and Kirill, gasping with terror, rushed with all his might toward the ancient temple. He desperately struggled and kicked, refusing to let himself be pulled to the bottom of the terrifying lake. As soon as a clay mound with a wooden idol appeared before him, he scrambled up the protruding roots and grass to solid ground in the blink of an eye. There was practically no room on the islet. It was all taken up by the idol, entwined with reeds and cattails. The ground beneath his feet slipped, threatening to drag Kirill, who had miraculously survived, back into the water. Without a second thought, he grabbed the protruding parts of the idol with his hands and began to climb. The soft moss peeled off the statue in layers at his touch. The ebony smelled disgustingly of rot, and his feet kept slipping off the precarious ledges and edges. But the monstrous guttural wheezing coming from below, the splashing of water, and the memory of painful bites all over his body gave Kirill the strength to fight. With the tenacity of a snake, he entwined his arms and legs around the pillar of the ancient god, and after a few minutes, he finally managed to reach the very top. After throwing down the horned skull and tightening his grip on the top of the idol, Kirill briefly caught his breath and looked around, throwing off his soaking wet and heavy jacket. It towered above the fog, which was gradually dissipating, as if it no longer had any need. Below, in the inky waters of Lake Koshch, dozens of hideous drowned figures splashed, their bottomless mouths gaping greedily and clawed hands reaching toward the idol. They resembled skeletons, covered in tattered greenish-black skin, slippery and sticky in appearance. Tufts of algae and moss dangled from their ear and eye sockets, and the gnashing of their blunt teeth echoed throughout the area. Who are they? What kind of monsters are these? Kirill thought feverishly, clutching the wooden statue with whitened fingers. How am I supposed to escape from here now? His body ached with fatigue, dozens of bites bled, but that was bearable. But Kirill couldn't overcome the panic that was impeding his thinking. He was choking on the thought that while he was peacefully floating in a boat on the lake, fishing and relaxing, the terrifying, hungry, drowned creatures circled beneath him like a school of sharks. The fog finally cleared, as if an invisible hand had waved it away. The distant shore, the departed boat, and even the bright orange awning of the tent Kirill had pitched earlier in the night became visible. Someone was standing near the tent. A clearly visible figure stood out against the red background. "Hey!" Kirill shouted at the top of his lungs. "Help!" His desperate cry shattered the silence of the night like a deafening thunderclap. The echoes obediently took up the cry, and the dark pines in the distance trembled as if from a gust of wind. The silhouette on the shore didn't even flinch. But Kirill certainly wasn't imagining it. He could see skinny legs, hands tucked into pockets, and even the tiny ember of a cigarette flickering in the darkness. "Yura," Kirill realized. "Yura, help! I'm here at the temple. Save me!" But no matter how much Kirill strained, no matter how much he called and pleaded for help, the caretaker didn't move. Only a barely noticeable orange light flickered, and then it too vanished into the night as Yura slowly turned and walked off into the depths of the forest. What the hell is going on? He couldn't have failed to hear me. He was even looking my way. Why didn't he help? What the hell is going on at this damn base? Through a tangle of distracted thoughts, Kirill suddenly remembered that his smartphone, turned off since the night before, was still in his zippered pocket. With a trembling hand, trying not to slip off the statue, he reached into his pants and fished out the fashionable gadget. The iPhone, a previous model, which all the sales associates in the store had unanimously declared was waterproof, obediently turned on. The screen lit up, and Kirill breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed the salespeople had been right this time. The smartphone had indeed survived a dip in icy water. His wet fingers slid across the display. He struggled to press the emergency call button, where a single number was listed on the speed dial. A monotonous ringing began. "So you finally remembered you have a wife." Lara's disgruntled voice finally rang out on the other end of the line. "Lara, listen to me carefully and don't interrupt. I need help. I'm at the fishing camp and something crazy is happening. I don't know how long I can defend myself from these creatures. I'm injured. I need help. Ambulance, fire department, police, call everyone. Write down the names. I'm not going to play your stupid games anymore. Lara interrupted her husband firmly, raising her voice. So listen to me, Kirill. I've already packed my things and am moving in with my mother today. I'm tired of fighting you and your selfishness. So, if you still want to spend all your time anywhere but with your wife, I have nothing to discuss with you. Lara, enough excuses. His wife interrupted him shrilly. Whatever stories you come up with, I'm not interested. I can't take it anymore. You've changed so much in recent years. I once married a caring student who wanted to spend every minute with me, but you've become a completely different person, so I'm leaving. Just like you wanted, all the time in the world is yours now. She hung up, and the shocked Kirill didn't even have time to stop her. Just as he began dialing the police number with wet fingers, realizing he wouldn't get any help or understanding from his wife, a piercing loud croak suddenly sounded overhead. A black, lightning-fast shadow flashed past the very top of his head, knocking the smartphone from his hands. The iPhone slipped from his fingers, fell like a stone, and disappeared into the inky waters of the lake, among the crowd of drowned people patiently awaiting their prey. Damn it, Kirill growled through clenched teeth, almost crying with anger, as he watched his last hope for salvation disappear. The raven let out a mocking cawing and took another turn. In a few swipes, it was at Kirill's side, and this time it snatched the cornered fisherman's headlamp. A bright beam of light pierced the darkness and melted into the water, slowly sinking into the depths. Kirill could now see little in the surrounding darkness, and when the raven's silhouette flashed past him again, he didn't even have time to dodge. A sharp beak sank into Kirill's head, causing him to scream. The bird circled, returned to its victim, and struck several more times. Its beak ripped through his skin, no matter how hard Kirill tried to shield himself. Long, hooked talons grabbed his hair, dug into his shoulders and arms, while the raven battered his head and forehead. Blood clouded Kirill's vision. He screamed in pain as the bird began ripping at his ears, pulling out entire strands of hair and tugging at his clothes, as if trying to move him. Wiping it away was useless. The raven returned again and again, even more brazenly, dodging his hands, now aiming for the fingers with which Kirill desperately clutched the wooden idol. He slipped, though. The blood had pooled so much that at some point his hand couldn't find a grip. All the protrusions on the statue suddenly became smooth, like sea-washed pebbles, and his beaten, swollen fingers simply slipped off. And as Kirill plummeted downwards, straight into the black waters of Lake Kosh, now, without any hope of rescue, a raven circled above him, cawing triumphantly. Its eyes were the color of an icy abyss, glowing with a frosty blue from within, piercingly cold, like those of an ancient pagan idol, frozen in silence on a small island. Kirill fell heavily into the water, and instantly dozens of arms wrapped around him, dragging him down to the very bottom of the lake. He screamed, but instead of sounds, only countless bubbles escaped his mouth, instantly rushing to the surface. The drowned men bit greedily into his body with their blunt teeth, tearing his skin and clothing to shreds. Black icy water mixed with scarlet hot blood. The idol's eyes flared especially brightly and went out, once again becoming just empty, scratched out sockets, overgrown with moss. Valera was overcome with drowsiness. The warmth of the stove enveloped his body like a soft down blanket, causing his heavy eyelids to droop. The sharp knife in the caretaker's hands glided slowly across the wooden block, peeling away layer after layer. The little doll gradually took on human form, strong, calloused hands, a sullen face, and a short, bristly mustache. He had made countless such blanks over the years. But each one was special, each one he remembered well, even though they had all long since sunk to the bottom of the lake. He was interrupted by a sharp, rhythmic knock on the window. Opening the casement, Valera set aside the unfinished doll and gazed into the darkness of the night. A coal-black raven emerged from the darkness in the window opening, folding its wings. The messenger's piercing light blue eyes, like shards of ice, flashed, and in a trumpet-like voice he said, "The sacrifice is accepted." Valera nodded. The raven instantly soared back into the air and vanished into the night. Slamming the window shut to keep the warmth inside, the caretaker was about to return to his wood carving, but a familiar voice called from the street, "You won't change anything. Don't blame yourself. Better yet, just accept it already." Valera sighed and stepped out onto the porch, letting the chill wind blow over his face. Yura was already waiting for him on the steps, his ever-present cigarette in his mouth. He waved his hand, inviting his companion to sit. "It's not that easy," Valera drawled, sitting down on the step. "Every time, it's like the first time. Do you think it's better to remain his powerless caretaker for the rest of time, neither alive nor dead?" Yura snapped discontentedly. "You know how he'll punish you if you stop honoring him, if you show him even a single moment of sympathy. As for me, keep doing your job, Valera, and don't resist God. Don't make the same mistakes I did. So many people. So what? All this in exchange for an abundance of game in the local forests, for a comfortable life, for your peace. After all, pull yourself together." "I'm not sure I can bear this for the rest of my days." Valera shook his head. "Then don't count on a peaceful end." Yura snapped, exhaling a white cloud of smoke. "Better go clean up all traces, and then occupy your mind with something useful. Find yourself a successor, for example. Take Pal Palich, for example. He's been trying to avoid this responsibility for too long, always hoping to buy his way out of it. It's time to bring him in." Yura jumped to his feet, his whole appearance demonstrating that he was tired of the conversation. "But there's no way to lure him here since that time." "Then we'll have to try," Yura said firmly. "We can't leave this place without an earthly caretaker. Don't anger Chernobog, son." Valera's father, who hadn't aged a day in decades, flicked his half-smoked cigarette into the air and headed toward the forest. Not a single blade of grass was crushed beneath his feet. His steps were silent and light, and soon the darkness swallowed Yura's thin figure. Only Valera remained sitting on the porch, his head bowed, pondering his fate. He stared fixedly at the orange flame of his father's cigarette, burning out on the ground. A minute after Yura left, it slowly vanished into thin air, as if it had never existed.